Hello and welcome. I'm Tom Burges Watson. You are watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya News headquarters. These are our top stories. Lebanon's health ministry says 37 people have been killed, more than 150 others injured in Israeli airstrikes during the course of the last 24 hours. Iran's supreme leader praises his country's armed forces for Tuesday's missile attack on Israel. He says he backs a ceasefire deal with Israel, provided that Gaza gets the same provision. Meanwhile, the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi pays a visit to Beirut, where he's been holding talks with Lebanese officials. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. At least 37 people have been killed in Lebanon during the course of the last 24 hours. This as Israel continues to strike Beirut and other areas of the country. Well, an Israeli strike cut off the main road that connects Lebanon to Syria today. The border with Syria is the only land route out of the country. And with flights in and out of Lebanon severely limited, this strike could leave thousands of people trapped. Meanwhile, 3 hospitals in Lebanon, including one on the outskirts of Beirut, have had to suspend services amidst ongoing Israeli bombardment. Well, the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi was in Beirut today for talks with Lebanese officials. He said that his country would always firmly support Hezbollah. He also pledged to give his backing to a potential ceasefire with Israel on the condition that Gaza is given the same provision. Well, Dr. Sami Nader is the director of the Institute of Political Science at Saint Joseph University in Beirut. Dr. Nader, thank you very much for joining us once again here on Al Arabiya News. Just bring us up to speed on the latest you're hearing on the battlefield. Israel says Hezbollah has taken heavy losses. What's your assessment?
I mean, definitely the amount of losses that Hezbollah have taken are unprecedented since the inception of this organization. Keep in mind that this organization went out victorious after 2006 war, and its rule widened in the region for the last decade and the half. But definitely since the last months, and more particularly the last 2 weeks, in fact, since the pager wave, it was clear how much exposed all the Hezbollah arsenal was to Israeli infiltration. This is on one side, and then the systematic decimation of its leadership by Israel. This will definitely weaken Hezbollah, despite the fact that the last days we have seen that the organization on the battlefield, and namely its in defensive position in South Lebanon, this organization kept a certain level of combativeness, kept a certain level of resilience. This is to say that all the indicators show that this war is about to last, because on one hand, Israel is determined to deal with what it considers an Iranian asset on the Mediterranean, and it has proven it has the superiority in terms of technology, in terms of air power, while Hezbollah is far from being smashed. So this shows that we are ahead. We have tough days ahead, and civil population have tough days to come.
Yeah, they're paying a very heavy price, the civilian population of Lebanon. That's something we're very much aware of. I just want to go back to talking about Hezbollah for a moment, if you will, because Hashem Safieddine was the cousin of the late Hezbollah head, Hassan Nasrallah. We understand that Safieddine has been injured, possibly more than injured. We don't know what his state is. He was supposed to be Nasrallah's successor, wasn't he?
He is. Actually, he has been called from Iraq 2 years after Nasrallah was sworn in as Secretary General, and everyone looked at him as the potential successor, as the hardliner in Hezbollah, and the function he fulfilled, being responsible of all the finances of the organization, show that he was in a very key position. And beside the fact that his relatives were in charge of the coordination with Iran. So he was in a very strategic and a very key position, very close to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard and very close to Nasrallah as well, and looked upon by his peer as a potential successor.
And just continuing to talk about Hassan Nasrallah, it's been exactly a week since he was killed in the southern suburbs of Beirut. We understand, well, there are reports that say he was buried in secret today. Then we had Hezbollah denying this. Why do you think there's so much mystery surrounding the burial of Hassan Nasrallah?
Because the organization is embarrassed by the fact they couldn't organize any funerals, and this is embarrassing for the organization. And if they are doing so, it is because of security reason. It is because they are under scrutiny, under very close surveillance by Israel, and no one from the top leadership could attend the funerals. Beside the facts that we don't know about what remains from the top leadership. So this would be a moment of total disclosure in that sense, that if no one show up, this is a problem. If some show up, this is a problem as well. So this is where the organization is a very delicate position. This is why, in my view, they are postponing the event. Not to say they will be cancelling it.
And just lastly, Dr. Nader, I just want to get your thoughts on why the Iranian foreign minister was in Beirut today. What was he doing there, do you think?
I think he has given mixed signals, in fact, because those who were expecting a settlement were waiting for the foreign minister to go along the line that the representative of Iran mentioned during his speech in front of the United Nations 2 days ago, while for the first time he made a reference to 1701 resolution. And this is a breakthrough. But during his visit today, the foreign minister did not mention 1701. Yes, he said that Iran will back a ceasefire. However, he insisted on linking the war Hezbollah is waging to a ceasefire in Gaza. And this is in total contradiction with 1701. This is signal, a step back from what the Iranian representative in front of the United Nations stated 2 days ago.
Okay, sorry to cut you short. We're out of time. Thank you so much for speaking to us once again, though. Dr. Sami Nader at Saint Joseph University in Beirut. Thank you. Meanwhile, the US is reported to have targeted 3 cities in Yemen, including the capital Sana'a and the port city of Hodeidah. Well, these strikes, which targeted Houthi strongholds, come just days after the Houthis threatened to escalate military operations against Israel. Well, that group has also been firing projectiles at US ships in the region. Well, for more on this, I'm joined by the former US Air Force Brigadier General Robert Spalding. General, you're also the former Senior Director for Strategic Planning at the US National Security Council. Thank you very much for joining us here on Al Arabiya News. The Houthis are, of course, backed by Iran. Just tell us about what sort of a threat they pose in the region, and do you see that threat getting more significant?
It really depends on the resources they get from Iran and China. as to what kind of threat they pose. I mean, obviously, if they have access to advanced weapons like, hypersonic missiles or ballistic missiles that can strike Israel, or shipping or U.S. naval presence in the region, then they could be a pretty significant threat.
I mean, we're all waiting to find out what Israel does next and how it retaliates for what happened on Tuesday. And of course, here we're seeing with the Houthis another example of Iran's proxies being dealt blow after blow. Do you think this is part of the groundwork being done ahead of that expected Israeli strike?
It very well could be, based on intelligence and what they know they have in stock, because they're sure to face attacks if they go after Iran. That's likely what they are looking at. I think the real challenge here is, though, being in the second Cold War, this is a proxy war that's going to continue. And unfortunately, they almost have unlimited resources, at least from an Iran and a Houthi perspective, because they're going to continue to get fed resources from China.
Just going back to how Israel responds, we understand that an attack or a counterattack could be imminent. What sort of targets do you think are being considered by Israel? And how does Israel even go about striking Iran? Because, of course, there are quite a lot of countries in between the two of them geographically. And I'm just wondering if their aircraft and their weapons have got the range.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't be going after mobile ballistic missiles, because those are quite hard to find. I would be going after the nuclear facilities and the missile production facilities. So I would imagine they're industrial targets related to Iran's nuclear production and their missile production. Okay,
so that's possibly what's going to be struck. I'd like to talk about the killing of Hassan Nasrallah exactly a week ago. He was killed when an Israeli bunker-busting bomb hit his hideout. And I just wanted to ask you, since you were a commander of a unit of the U.S. Air Force that carried out strategic airstrikes, what have we learned about the weaponry that was used by Israel to kill Nasrallah?
Well, I think there's been this belief, and especially exists in Iran, that if you want to protect something, you need to bury it. And I think what the Israeli strike showed is that you can bury it, but the weapons can also get down there.
And what kind of weapons, therefore, were used? What can you tell us about the specific weapon that was used to kill him?
As I understand it, it was a 2,000-pound GPS-guided joint direct attack munition.
Okay, so something that could penetrate deep below the ground, and obviously a bunker under a building in a residential area of Beirut didn't stand a chance, I presume, against a weapon like that.
Well, that's right. And I think, if Israel is going to attack, hard and deeply buried targets, it's because they've studied the target and they've engineered a way to get the weapon down there and have it be effective.
Hezbollah has been dealt blow after blow. How seriously degraded do you think that group is now?
It's hard to say. As with all terrorist groups, they're highly decentralized, and so they have the ability to continue to operate even if their leadership is cut off. I think it's less about taking care of Hezbollah. It's really more about what can you do, what can you hope to do with Iran. Again, as long as they're getting resources from China, you're going to see them re-equip, refit, and continue to have the ability to strike Israel. It's not going to end anytime soon.
But certainly this will have had a severe impact on morale and the psychology of Hezbollah as an organization.
I don't know about that. I actually think that in many ways, it probably makes them more determined. I think what we're not paying attention to here is really the real outcome that Hamas wanted when it struck on October 7th. And it really wasn't the actual physical attack. I'm sure the people involved were very focused on that. But overall, the impact has been to increase anti-Israel rhetoric around the United States and around the globe. And I think that was the ultimate aim here. And so I think this is continuous effort to diminish Israel's eyes in the world in order to get support for Iran's position in the region.
And just lastly, I wanted to ask you about the commercial airlines that have suspended services in some parts of the Middle East. I just want to ask for your assessment at how at risk you think passenger planes are in the context of what we're seeing right now in the region.
Well, I mean, to the extent that you're going to expect Israeli strikes in Iran, that could be quite dangerous, particularly if they don't have if they don't have good shot control within Iran. So, they think they're shooting an Israeli plane when they're actually shooting a commercial airliner. I think for the rest of the region, the risk is quite low.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. Brigadier General Robert Spalding, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei pledged today that together with allies around the region, his country will continue fighting Israel. His 40-minute address in Tehran was his first since Iran launched Tuesday's attack on Israel. That was Iran's second ever such attack. Well, let's listen to a clip of what Iran's Supreme Leader actually said.
Nobody, based on any international laws, has the right to object to the nation of Lebanon and Lebanon's Hezbollah and ask why they are supporting Gaza and the uprising of the Palestinian people as they have carried out their duty. It is an Islamic ruling and logical law and also an international and global logic. Palestinians are defending their land. Their defense is legitimate and helping them is also legitimate. The Al-Aqsa Storm operation that took place last year around the same days as now was an international right, logical and legal move. Palestinians had the right. The brilliant action of our armed forces 2 or 3 nights ago was a completely legal and legitimate operation.
Iran's Supreme Leader speaking there. Well, let's get some more analysis and we can speak to Arash Azizi. Thank you so much for joining us. You're an Iran expert. You're also a visiting fellow at Boston University and the author of The Shadow Commander, Soleimani, the US and Iran's Global Ambitions. Thank you so much for being with us. What stood out for you in that address made by the Supreme Leader earlier on today?
I think it really didn't give us a clue as to Khamenei's thinking about this really difficult moment that he finds himself in. For a long time, Khamenei had operated on the basis of what I call the Khamenei doctrine, or what some has called the no war, no peace, i.e. he didn't get Iran into a direct war with Israel, but he didn't make peace with the West or Israel either, obviously. So he built his regional militias, continued Iran's sort of belligerent policies without getting into a war. And that doctrine has collapsed. I saw no reckoning with that or with the very tough moment that Iran finds itself in when it's in a danger of a direct confrontation with Israel. What I did hear is sort of this old hackneyed talking points that Khamenei has that really relates back to his youth as a revolutionary. He spoke about Muslim unity, how if Muslims are united, they'll never be defeated, that it's the colonial powers who are always using what he calls sort of a divide and conquer game. And if only all the Muslims came together, Israel would stand no chance against them, not really recognizing the actual regional dynamics and the really toughest spot that Iran finds itself in. So I didn't hear anything surprising. And as I said, no real reckoning. I think it was mostly the speech itself, the fact that it was happening, was supposed to be a show of defiance and also a show of unity of regime ranks, which it did show since, many different part of regime factions did attend. After all, the reformists are back in the presidency with Pezeshkian, and figures like Hassan Khomeini, a grandson of the founder of the revolution, who is usually a critical figure, also went, and many others went to the Friday prayer. So it did show some regime unity, if you will, but it didn't show any sort of a strategic thinking or any new doctrine or reckoning with the situation, as we've sometimes seen from Khamenei's speeches.
We've heard quite a bit about paranoia and nervousness in the ranks of the Iranian leadership, given the level of infiltration in Hezbollah and in other proxies around the region. Was any of that nervousness reflected in what the Supreme Leader said today?
I think it was designed not to show that nervousness. No, in that sense, he was it was designed to be a speech that shows, as I said, defiance and continuity. We should remember Ayatollah Khamenei, he technically has the right to give the Friday prayer anytime he wants. All the other Tehran Friday prayers are usually, their title is interim Friday prayer leader because the permanent one is Khamenei, but he rarely uses the privilege. The last time he did was 5 years ago when Soleimani was killed. And he wanted to very much show we're in power, we're in the saddle, we're continuing. But the fact of the matter is, his regime stands really exposed in, not only is very unpopular, of course, with its own populace, but it's also penetrated intelligence-wise by Israel pretty extensively. I mean, it's kind of really remarkable when you look at the number of things Israel has been able to do in Iran, and to Iran's allies, killing of Nasrallah, killing of Haniyeh, stealing of Iranians' nuclear archives, assassinating Iranian nuclear scientists, killing of Fakhrizadeh, Iran's sort of chief nuclear expert, in 2020. They know about this problem for a very long time, and the swift destruction of Hezbollah's command in the last few weeks has proved it only more. But no, Khamenei continues to be defiant, and I think he is very worried, and I think it's a very tough place he's in, but you couldn't say that from the speech so much.
Okay. We heard earlier this week Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, trying to reach out to the people of Iran. Don't you think, though, and of course we're waiting to see what Israel does next, and, there's a sense that an Israeli strike on Iran could be imminent. Do you think such a strike, though, could have the opposite effect of what Benjamin Netanyahu was talking about at the beginning of the week, which was finding cracks in a society, and instead it would give the Iranian people something to rally around?
I like to say it's a bit of a historian cop-out, but I usually like to say, events like this will have unpredictable consequences. That's the only honest thing one can tell about them, right? What kind of effect will Israeli attack on Iran have inside the Iranian society depends on what kind of attacks we're talking about, and depends on a whole range of other factors like what positions will the regime take, how will it respond, how extensive the war is. I will tell you this, though. There definitely is a bit of a regime unity. So the different ranks of the regime, which are pretty fractious, have made a united front against the possibility of Israel. And this is significant because it's a significant part of the Iranian society. I don't think it's a majority, but if you count the reformist factions and the centrist factions and, not just the hardline, core of the regime, which I estimated like 10-15%, but a bit broader, they are coming out and they are saying that, they're going to defend Iran, and Iran will try very much from the day one to use the fact that Iranians are mostly patriotic people, will try to use a nationalist card, a patriotic card to unite them. But frankly, there are also many who would get really angry at Khamenei for having put the country in these conditions. After all, it's his policies that has resulted and brought us to where we are. So, what kind of actual consequences it will have, it's not immediately clear. But also, let me say this also. My friend Karim Sajjadpour, a great Iran expert, a few days ago said it couple of days ago said it in CNN that the majority of Iranians are known to not support their government and to be very much against it, but they're also not organized. The opponents of the regime are not organized. So the idea that, Israel will attack, as a result, the regime will fall like a house of cards and people will organize and take power. I mean, that's fanciful. Where we have to sort of pay attention to and look is mostly inside the regime, inside the establishment, where different commanders of the Revolutionary Guards, different centers of sort of military power in Iran and military wealth in Iran will have to make decisions about the future of Iran and how to manage that. What will be a war with Israel, a war of national defense against Israel, I guess, or how to continue it, or whether to negotiate, or how to negotiate. They're the ones who will, they're the ones who might have to shift power internally. This is a fancy way of saying, they might have to do a coup against Khamenei or make him retire. He's 85 years old, so a coup might be just a matter of having him stay at home and realizing finally that Iran does need to change some of its policies if it wants to continue. But yeah, so these are, as I said, the consequences will be unpredictable and likely very disastrous, may I add. But these are some of the dynamics that might result.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. Iran expert, historian and author Arash Azizi. Thank you very much indeed. Well, this week, Israel's invasion of Lebanon and Iran's missile attack on Israel have heightened concerns of a high-intensity conflict in the region. And of course, the war in Gaza still rages on. Well, it's all eyes on Israel now to see what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu meant when he said that Iran will pay for Tuesday's attack on his country. Well, for more analysis, I'm joined by our correspondent, Trent Murray, who joins us from Tel Aviv. Trent, good to have you with us. President Joe Biden says the United States has been discussing possible Israeli targets in Iran. What are people there saying about when Israel will strike Iran and what they will strike?
Well, Tom, I mean, as you might imagine, much of it just remains speculation right now within the Israeli media. The government is being quite tight-lipped, probably understandably, around what they will do. But there is a general sense here that some sort of response, that a firm one, is absolutely coming to that ballistic missile attack. We can obviously look for clues that are in the public domain, and I think the biggest one does remain President Biden affirming to those reporters about 24 hours ago that oil and gas infrastructure was something that was being discussed between Israel and the United States. One imagines, of course, as Israel does sort of chart its next steps and what it will do, they're also having to talk to the US and some of their other allies about how to prepare for any sort of retaliation, which of course Tehran is pledging. We know that during the two big missile attacks launched by Iran, the one in April and the one on Tuesday, at both of those points in time, Israel did need to rely on some of its allies, namely the US, to help back up the Iron Dome defence system. We know on Tuesday night, 2 US warships off the coast here fired off interceptor missiles in order to try and support the IDF in shooting down those projectiles. And so I would imagine as they sort of chart the strategic steps of where they might strike in Iran, they also want to make sure that they are absolutely prepared on the home front for any sort of mass rapid attack that Tehran may unleash in response.
The Israeli military, meanwhile, saying it's killed Hezbollah's communications chief. There are also reports that Hashem Safieddine, who was the cousin of the late Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah, and also his potential successor, was targeted as well today. Are we hearing anything about his fate?
There's been no official confirmation from the IDF, particularly in relation to the potential replacement of Hassan Nasrallah. Now, what we know is that there was, of course, a series of airstrikes on Beirut last night. The IDF confirmed that they launched those, and they said that they targeted, in particular, what they said was the intelligence headquarters of Hezbollah. They did confirm that, from their perspective, one senior Hezbollah official that they killed was that communications director, the effectively who was in charge of the group's communications efforts. But they've not commented on this reported news of Hashem Safieddine. We are only hearing that both from the New York Times and Axios. US officials have reportedly told US media that he was in the bunker of one of those buildings that was targeted, but we haven't had any response from Hezbollah either. So I think many are obviously watching this, though, because he really was, in many ways, the favourite to replace Hassan Nasrallah. And just a week on from Nasrallah's assassination, the news that we're hearing is that he may have also now been targeted in an Israeli operation. So certainly many in this region are closely watching for any clues over what happened last night in Beirut, both on the Israeli front and also, of course, in Lebanon.
And just lastly and briefly, if you will, Israel began its ground incursion into southern Lebanon earlier in the week. We understand that 9 Israeli soldiers have been killed since the incursion began. Just give us a quick update on what's been happening on the battlefield.
Yeah, well, we're hearing heavy firefights taking place on the battlefield, and the area of operations is expanding from the Israelis' perspective. There's now 105 towns and villages in southern Lebanon under evacuation orders, and the IDF says it's continuing to call up more reservists to take part in that operation. We heard from Yoav Gallant today, the defence minister, with a pretty ominous warning for where this war is heading. He said Israel still had some surprises up its sleeve for Hezbollah.
OK, our Tel Aviv correspondent Trent Murray, thank you very much indeed for bringing us all the latest there. Just before we leave you, a quick reminder of our top stories here on Al Arabiya News. Lebanon's health ministry says 37 people have been killed. More than 150 others have been injured in Israeli airstrikes during the course of the last 24 hours. Iran's supreme leader praises his country's armed forces for Tuesday's missile attack on Israel. He says he backs a ceasefire deal with Israel, provided that Gaza gets the same provision. And the Iranian foreign minister is in Beirut, where he's been holding talks with Lebanese officials. Well, that is all we have time for. Coming up next is the Riz Khan Show. That's followed by Hadley Gamble and her exclusive interview with the Lebanese kingmaker Walid Jumblat. Plus, at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time, join us for a look back at some of the best bits of global news today so far. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned.